Well, let's start today by kind of going over what's been going on here. I'm on just starting the third hour of this video. I strongly suggest, if you can, go back to that first video that's about an hour long and do that one first, and then do the next three, about 20 minutes each, and you can kind of get up to speed to where we are. I'm going to try for an hour today. I don't know if this little iPad will go that long, but at any rate, first one worked. Well, let's go to the story. We've finished, and we're up to about page 26 out of 111. So we're on a pace for about 12 pages an hour. Well, that's not very fast, but I guess that's the way it goes. Let's talk about the story a little bit. This is a science fiction story. And the people involved, all these characters, are not the main characters. They don't even know what's going on for the most part. They're sort of out in the cold. They're being manipulated. Well, not really, but in the background, in the great scheme of things, I think they're being manipulated. But that's okay. You need people like this to make a story. The story, actually, I have to admit, this story started out as a porn story. There was a lot of porn in it. Even now, when I go over the pages, there's a lot of stuff that I have to censor sort of on the fly. So there are times when I'm going to kind of stutter and hold my mouth open a little bit, trying to figure out how to tell the story without getting into some details. At any rate, to put it truthfully, the porn really doesn't do anything for the story. It's just for, when I did this, it was like just for me. It's not for anybody else. I'm not going to give it to anybody. I'm not going to let anybody else read it. But then I started to think about the overall story. This is an interesting story that has a lot of details, a lot of stuff going on in the background with some science in it that is just the most astounding thing I ever heard of. And I have to admit to you that I don't know where this stuff came from. I'm going to pretend that it came from my past, but it didn't. It came from my mind. So with those details in mind, and also I think I wanted to mention that this story is not about Arkansas. It's not about Middletown. The main part of it doesn't even take place on this planet. You gotta sit back and you gotta think about, like, what's going on. And Mac in the story is continually surprised about what's going on in the background. It's like, is this real? just like you're probably thinking, you've watched 4 of these videos so far, and you're on the 5th, and you're wondering, what's the point? I just don't know. I'm telling the story. I don't know what the point is. It's for me, this is really an interesting kind of a thing. There's some stuff that's going on that's just amazing. So let's start the story. The last part of what you saw in the last one was I was talking about Pinky showing Mac this underground tram station. And he just needs something to help him get away from all these exotic things that are going on, so he agreed to go swimming with Pinky. And they're still down in the station, so Pinky took his hand and led him back into the tunnel and into that sweeping turn up into what was probably the second level below ground, and approaching those two swinging doors. And when they got there, Pinky let go of his hand and said, "You go first. We'll just prove that this works, that by holding hands as I walk through, I'm cleared already. So we'll make sure that you're cleared. So go ahead and go through the door." Well, he walked up to the door opened away from him. So that door goes both ways, depending on what the door detects is the approaching persons. I stopped to let Pinky catch up. She said in all seriousness, as she reached for my hand, "Not a word, ever." I nodded. So Pinky and I climbed the stairs and headed toward the kitchen. Gracie was just puttering around doing some prep work in the kitchen, and was presently standing by the sink with a cup of coffee in her hand. I looked around, and for the first time I saw the same kind of coffee maker that Sharon has in her office. "Good coffee, Gracie?" She turned with a huge smile and said, "The best." I said to Gracie that Pinky and I were going for a swim before lunch. I told her we would be back in about an hour, which would coincide with her normal published lunchtime. Gracie said there would be soup and sandwiches today. "I'll surprise you," she said as she continued. "You'll be enchanted. Go have fun." She said that Mark and Shelley had gone to Middletown shopping for groceries and this and that at Big Sky John's Market. I asked her if she wanted to go along for a swim, and she said no. She had some things she needed to get done today without fail. Pinky and I then said, "Okay, see you later," and walked out the door toward the pool house. Well, for the next hour and a half, Pinky and I had a lot of fun. This was a big pool house, and we had it all to ourselves. And we just enjoyed ourselves, and we just kind of hung around and hung on to the side of the pool and just sat there and talked and just had a lot of fun. Got finished, and got back into our clothes, and we walked into the kitchen and sat down as Gracie served the soup and sandwiches. We were hungry. She had minestrone soup and fried meatloaf sandwiches. She sat and had lunch with us. I remarked that to swim really helped erase the cobwebs of my mind. Pinky acted completely normal and ate like a horse. She finished her sandwich and reached for the last fourth of mine. Well, I gave up and I gave it to her. And she said she would reward me one of these days, but that she was really hungry for some reason. Gracie said swimming does that for a person. Gracie was in a happy mood today for some reason. I think she could see that there were good vibes between Pinky and myself. Little did she know. Or maybe she could see the evidence plain as day. I think she surmised that I would not normally give up even a quarter of my sandwich to Pinky, as Pinky would simply ask Gracie to fix her another. The familiarity of her reaching onto my plate was unusual, and Gracie, I thought, was sure to have noticed. The next morning I woke up early for some reason. I turned over on my back, and as I settled in, I heard a soft knock on my door. It was very quiet and still. I called out quietly to come in. The door opened and a slender figure came in and closed the door behind her. She came over to the bed and climbed onto the bed beside me. She asked if she could visit with me early in the mornings like this. I said sure. Pinky told me that she had talked to her mom about me and told her that she felt like I was becoming more like a father figure. She specifically asked if she would approve if Pinky came over to my room in the main house early in the morning to visit when it was still and quiet. Sharon told her that she approved sincerely. She told Pinky that it was an opportunity not to be missed. She said that if it was early enough, she should ask me if it was okay to snuggle for a while before they got up. She said that she would hug me and kiss me if she could. Sharon told Pinky that the rewards of becoming close to me would be enormous. I was impressed that they had talked like that. So we talked for a while, and then another soft knock came from the door. I told Pinky to go let her mom in. Well, Pinky was still in her PJs and a soft wrap that went to her knees. She walked straight to the door, and in fact Sharon was standing there. Pinky grabbed her mom's hand and pulled her into the room. Pinky led the way to my bed and motioned for her mom to get comfortable. Well, that was just unusual, but I really enjoyed having some movement on my bed early in the morning. I cherished those mornings. And it happened from time to time. She says, I'm kind of going forward in the story a little bit. Well, we didn't do this every morning. It was kind of a hit and miss kind of thing. It was not like it was a scheduled visit or anything like that. Um, it was random. The snuggling time I had with these two were delightful. I think actually they coordinated their schedules so that there was some time between us. Well, it turns out that sometimes when it rains, it pours. Seems like today was full of surprises. I happened to be a few minutes early for supper that night. I thought I would just go on down and have a cup of coffee. I stepped out into the hall and I saw Shelley walking toward me from the attic entrance. I waited for her, and as she approached, it looked like it was not to pass by, but was headed straight toward me. She got within a footstep from me, and I held out my arms, and she walked into my arms. I enfolded her close to me. She pulled back after a couple of relaxed minutes and said that she really needed to be able to show affection to somebody and to have them show her some. You know, there was nobody out on the farm even close to her age or her gender. Well, I looked at her for a few seconds, and I realized this woman was asking me for something precious. Furthermore, I realized Shelley had a good look. She was not beautiful, but had a look of character about her. She also had a softness of body, as I felt her body fitted close to mine. I briefly looked down to her chest, and I was pleased. I looked back up into her eyes, and I said, Shelley, would you be interested in spending some time in my room tonight for a visit? To have a chat, so to speak? Her face broke apart with the widest grin I have ever seen as she said breathlessly, "You bet." I moved my head close and aimed for her lips. She duplicated my move, and we wound up having the best first kiss I have ever had in my life. It was just perfect. Well, I I was almost kind of feeling hyperventilating. And she just sort of said out loud, "Would you mind if tonight I slept with you until maybe 5 a.m? She says that she knew that I already had early morning visitors, and she said that she would leave before they showed up. My jaw dropped, and I said, "Just do it." I told her that if she wanted, she could share as much of my affection as she was capable of getting, and that I would love to feel hers toward me. She kissed me again as we stood alone in the upper hall. I thought I was starting to feel like the lord of the manor. What was it? Droit du Seigneur. I didn't at any time feel like this overall situation could include Gracie, as it was obvious it would not be appropriate. The other women? So sure, why not? Shelley gave me one last kiss and a bump against my belly and pulled away. She asked, "What time?" Well, I thought 22:30 would work pretty good, and asked her if that would fit her plans. Shelley told me that if I wanted, I could skip supper and we could start right away. I told her that I was hungry for her, but that I also needed other things in my mouth for sustenance. She gave me an affectionate smile and then leaned in to whisper in my ear that we should not be late for supper, otherwise people would talk. I threw caution to the wind and took her hand as we descended the staircase. In the hall, we met Pinky and Sharon headed for the dining room. Sharon immediately picked up on the hand-holding Shelley and I were doing. She stopped us with an upheld hand. Pinky stopped and saw what had captured her mom's attention. Sharon says, "Well." And with a huge smile on her face, she stepped up to us, grabbed Shelley, and gave her an equally huge hug. Pinky stepped up, and as Sharon backed away from Shelley, Pinky took her place for another huge hug. Sharon cleared her throat, said it was now clear that there were now 3 of us that shared this man's attention. "Is that not right, Shelley?" Shelley visibly gulped and nodded. Sharon said that nothing more needs to be said. She said that if I didn't mind, would it be okay for the 3 of us to share your bed overnight most nights? She said they would work out a schedule and I would just pretend to be surprised when the night's companion showed up. They started to walk toward the dining room, and Gracie was just then coming in with the trays of food, and she saw all 4 of us there with big grins and smiles on our face. And she said if anyone wanted to let her in on the joke, she would be available for 15 minutes after the meal was over. The 4 of us all burst out laughing. Gracie said under her breath, "Women, sluts, all of them." The room exploded in laughter. Gracie grinned at what her uncouth, uncommonly funny comments had extracted. Mark just sat there and grinned without knowing what he was grinning about. Gracie said she would tell him later, and for him to just shut up and eat. We all started our laughter all over again. Needless to say, we had a great supper, and even Mark seemed to sense what it was all about. Well, I'm going to kind of jump ahead a little bit here. Several pages. We're going to get into some interesting things here. I had yet to take a good look at the outside part of my farm. So one evening at dinner in a big house, I announced that I had decided to go for a hike. And that led to the most amazing times yet in the big house in Stag Hammer. The night before, I remembered the small box my father had given me the last time he had appeared at the airfield. I'd put it away in my dresser. Had to search for it, but found it exactly where I'd put it. I opened it and found inside a short note in his handwriting and a flat square of material about 2 inches on a side and about 1/4 of an inch thick. It had finely polished surfaces, with one I would call the top, made of some transparent material which appeared completely black. The square was in a small bag of some other material which I could not identify either. I turned it over and I examined it on all sides and could not see what it was, or what, if anything other than decorative, it was used for. In his note, he again talked about certain things I should do during my stay in the big house. He suggested that there was someone who would guide me. This person would appear and I should follow their suggestions as if they came from him directly. He indicated that he had taught this person for several years, and that in all likelihood I would become their mentor as time went on. He finished by saying that he strongly recommended a short hike in the hills, and that depending on your guide, they would show him things that would enhance his life in unimaginable ways. You have only to grasp what is being offered. He ended the note by saying he would be unavailable for some time. He wished me good luck and said goodbye. Taking his note at face value, I wished him luck, felt I was sure to see him once again. So that evening I told the table that I had decided to go take a look up on the mountain. I explained that I had come into certain information that indicated I should do this. My statement brought delight to those at the table. Mark at the head, counterclockwise, was Pinky, myself, Sharon at the other end, Shelley across from me, and next to Mark, opposite from Pinky, was Gracie. They were all smiling and chattering away about me taking a hike. I had to laugh. Maybe they did want me to go take a hike. As they were all chattering away, Pinky cleared her throat, sat up straight, and announced that she wanted to go along. She caught her remark as maybe a bit too forceful, so she turned to me and added, "Please, please? Pretty please?" This caught me by surprise. I thought I would be fully involved alone in this discovery phase of my adventure and never gave it a thought about having someone along. All of them had stopped eating, like frozen in time. I realized I was running out of time here, but my thoughts turned to what my father had said to me in his note. Was Pinky my guide? I said out loud that I was very happy that you would want to go with me. I'll be needing a guide to keep me safe and not let me get lost. Everybody at the table started eating again, and between bites we were all very happy to see us both getting ready for an adventure. I asked Pinky if she had ever been on a hike up in the mountain. She looked down at her plate and said quietly that yes, she had been up there. And Gracie piped up and said, "You certainly have, young lady." Gracie turned to me and said that Pinky had been going up on the mountain alone since she was about 6. She told us the story about Pinky coming into the kitchen one day, telling Gracie that she was going to go for a walk. Gracie said that Pinky came home 3 days later looking like she had just gone for a 5-minute walk. Gracie said the next time Pinky had come into the kitchen and announced she was going for a walk, Mark had attempted to follow her and lost her in the first big patch of grass on the other side of the fence at the road. After that, they had to assume that she could look after herself or that someone up on the mountain was keeping an eye on her. There were all sorts of stories about mountain men assisting those few who braved the ghost stories and went for hikes of an hour or so on the outside flanks of the mountain. None but Pinky had ever dared to go and come back unannounced from a hike of some days on the inside of home. When Gracie said this, I started. I asked her what she meant by saying inside of home. She said that it was simply that the Valley of Stag Hammer was their home, and it was on the inside after all. Well, I turned to Pinky and asked if she would organize our hike. Like something for lunch and some small day packs and the like. What did she recommend he wear and other details? She agreed immediately and turned to Gracie and asked if she would fix some food to take along. Gracie said, "Certainly." I asked Pinky what time did she expect us to be back. I said that if it was after dark tomorrow evening, starting in the morning, if it was after dark tomorrow evening, they should take a couple of flashlights. Pinky said that it would likely be after dark Monday next. It was then Saturday night, so Pinky said that we should start out in the morning and be gone a week. I was not sure I heard her right, so I asked her if she was really talking about a week up in the mountains. Pinky said, "Sure, we'll be missing all the good stuff by making it so short, but that she would try for some shortcuts that will let us see most of it." I asked her exactly how many times she had been up on the mountain alone. She again looked down at her plate, said to a sudden stillness at the table, "Oh, a few hundred times, I would say, more or less." Gracie, in the stillness, said, "Bull. You've been up on the mountain 1,000 times in 5 years, girl." I said to the table at large and remarked that Pinky would be sure to be the best guide I could ever find in these parts. Gracie added an exclamation point by saying, "For sure, in these parts." Pinky led me to the compound storehouse, where she said she expected to find everything we needed for a week up in the hills. We picked out bags, sleeping bags with blow-up mattresses and ground sheets, a small 2-man tent which Pinky divided out right there with me taking the lion's share of the weight. As we toiled gathering various items for our hike, Pinky said that if I got tired that she would take some of the weight off my pack for hers. She said this so matter-of-factly that I had to take her at face value. I wondered what I was getting into with this 10-year-old seasoned mountain man, girl. How old did she say she was exactly? Was my father the one who kept watch over this small girl who kept returning to his mountain? Did my father have a lookout place where, when he spotted me walking toward the airfield, he could rush to his plane and meet me there? How could he do that? A landing strip of his own up in the mountains? I could see no way he could be the mystery man in the mountains. But then again, could Pinky simply be one of those remarkable people who survived the most abysmal conditions year after year and come home looking like they had been for a stroll down to the pond and back? As we passed over the road bisecting the property, we approached the actual start of the mountain. The property ahead had a fence. There was a gate we opened and closed as we passed. Pinky said seemingly to nobody in particular that at least this time she wasn't going to have to dodge Mark or one of the others trying to tail her. She said that we'd go through the open field for 2 miles, and then we get into the trees in the center of the quadrangle for the first part of the hike. She looked at me and asked if I wanted her to take some of the load off my pack. I laughed. We weighed the packs just before we left. I had 45 pounds and Pinky had 40. I wondered if she was serious. I could tell that 45 pounds after 6 hours on the road would actually start to feel like 100. Pinky started talking. She said that she had met my father on her first hike. He walked along with her and started teaching her about the forest right away. On that first day, he showed her plants that were safe to eat. He showed her the forest water supply. That was almost always a pipe stuck in the ground in a bank where there was a wet spring. The pipes always ran, even in the dry weather. From time to time, he would stop at a certain place on the trail where he showed her the signs that showed the exit. They would exit the main trail, and a short distance away would be found a small, clear pool embedded in the rocks. Mac would take off his shoes and dip his feet in the pool. Very relaxing, he enthused, while recommending she do the same. They did this several times. And take a short break here. During this first trip, Mac got out of the pool and they got their clothes put back on, and he led her up into the forest a few yards, and there was a doorway. He opened the door and they went down a short hall to Mac's home in the mountain. He took her for a ride that first day on a monorail, an overhead monorail. And he took her into what turned out to be the mountain dispensary. He had certain procedures done on Pinky by two small med bots that wound up sitting by Pinky's head. They did all these things automatically. They altered her genes so that she would probably never ever get sick again. They modified her mind to enable advanced education and did other things to her. Came back to Mac's quarters, and by then Pinky was ready for bed, so Mac put her to bed with a headset on, and she was taught throughout the whole night. Medbots. How interesting. Mac took her to the translation center. He said, you're going to go to L5 for about a week. This actually, let me be clear, this actually happened after some trips up into the mountain. A trip that fascinated her, said no end. It was like a fantasy land in space. She said that she felt no fear being in space, nor did she feel anything but love for her people, she called them. She said she wasn't going to attempt to describe them, as he would in time meet them himself. Well, let's see. From now on, I'm going to refer to the father as Pop. And Mac, of course, will still be Mac, but we're going to call his father Pop. She said that Pop had taken her to the transition station, where she had translated to L5. She said she spent nearly a week there, being attached to their advanced learning systems every night. At the end of that first visit to L5, she in theory knew that no Earth time had elapsed while there. The people put her in the chamber and again asked her to stand on the circle and hold on to the two handles in front of her. She said the chamber door closed and then immediately opened. She looked out the door and saw Pop there, in the same stance she remembered from a week ago as he watched her go on her first trip. She walked out and into his arms. They stood there for a short time, And then he asked her if she was ready to go home. When they, excuse me, when they arrived back at Pop's area, they both headed for the pool in the forest. It was like that was a treat to go soak in a hot tub. This was in the middle of a forest. It was made out of rock, but it was actually shaped rock. There were at least 2 nice seating area chairs underwater in this hot tub. The water that came from one of those pipes in the hill, and the water was nice and warm. It was not normal spring water. Well, we were still in the middle of the hike, okay? Pinky stopped and looked into my eyes. She was like kind of right there, and she asked me if her talking about her and his father bothered him. I told her no, it didn't. In fact, I told her that I was thinking about asking her some questions about my father. Well, after all these stories, I thought it was no wonder she had made upwards of 1,000 trips into the mountains to meet up with his father, who spent many hours tending to her and making her feel comfortable in the forest. She was indeed a remarkable woman, child. He thought he would wait to query her about her supposed age as opposed to her claimed age. She said she was about 29, but she was in a 12-year-old body. Pinky seemed to have wound down a little bit as we walked along. She stopped talking about her personal adventures with my father, turned to the mountain around us. The slope was gradually increasing, but was still nearly flat, with the forest trees on each side of us around the cleared border boundary, still showing themselves nearly vertical as they passed behind us as we walked. I thought from a distance, like from the house windows on the back extension, the perspective made it seem the mountain going up to vertical in maybe a mile or so. Up close and personal, like we were hiking up the cleared area, the slope so gradually increased so that it was obvious that it was at the very least another 15 miles to the top. Pinky had said that we would go into the forest after a couple of miles in the cleared area. I looked behind me and could not see the road or the fence at the road. The house looked very small at this distance. Pinky noticed me looking behind us and stopped. She said that we should stop for a few minutes and just look around us. I did that. It was good because I thought this 1,400 acres I had bought was a lot bigger than was apparent. I looked for details of the house and could hardly make out the outline. We had come several miles while Pinky talked. It was good for her to relive her past adventures, but it was also obvious that she had a lot more to say. My father was right. My guide was by far the most knowledgeable of anyone in my orbit. I wonder if all this is just random by chance type stuff, or is this time of my life the culmination of a lot of behind-the-scenes maneuvering? Since my father seemed to be lurking everywhere I looked in this local scene, I thought there was some likelihood it was not by chance, but by plan. While I mused, Pinky stood still, mostly watching me. I was trying to take it all in and failing miserably. I could see the surface of my surroundings, but none of the detail. I was confused. What, where, why, how, all seemed to be legitimate questions. I shook myself and turned to Pinky. "Ready?" I asked. She says, "Yup." She told me then that we were going into the forest. She turned east across the cleared strip, and just a few yards we were under the trees. She said as we walked that she was starting to feel comfortable with the hike being out of view if someone were trying to track us. I asked, why would anyone want to track two residents on a seemingly innocent day hike? Pinky said, "You are naive. There are lots of people trying to find out the secrets of this mountain. And believe it or not, most of them know of us and our names and telephone numbers and mountains of other data. That's why I have spent the past 5 years of my life learning the details of this place so I can relate them to you. My life since I was 6 has actually been devoted to you, whether you know it or not." She said that we were going only a few more yards to where there was an area we can take off our packs. She said that she needed to start telling me about this place so you can have some inkling of what you will see and learn. She said that most likely they knew of the details of the mountain, were not so naive themselves to think they knew what or who were behind it. Who built it all? Where did they go when you arrived in Middletown? Who runs this place? Who is maintaining it while these people are gone? Are they even people? I thought Pinky was expressing random thoughts, but I realized that, as my father told me in his note, that she was aware of the answers to these questions. Pinky stopped and turned to me. She said to me that, contrary to what I may be thinking, that it was going to take a lot longer than a week to show you what is here and why. We are going to make many trips up here. I wondered again how old she really was in truth. We are going to make many trips up here? I could hardly believe her apparent maturity. She was not a 10-year-old. I was to find out the truth was indeed stranger than fiction. We walked perhaps another half-mile when we came to an open glen with a moss carpet, and on one side a small pool more like a large hot tub than a random forest pool along a random stream. This place looked natural, but below the surface was artificial. Upstream, the water emerged from below ground someplace as it started maybe 5 yards up the hill. Downstream, the water went underground again, less than 4 yards from the lip of the pool. I shucked my pack and went over to the edge and stooped down. The water was not ice cold. It was very comfortable, and I estimated it was probably closer to 85. I had this instant urge to shuck my clothes and get in for a soak. Well, I sat there on my heels, soaking in this peaceful glen. I noticed movement behind me. I turned and saw Pinky had dropped her pack, her clothes, and her shoes and socks, and was walking to the upper end of the pool where there seemed to be rock steps built into the end. She stepped in as she said, "Last one in is a rotten egg." I was beginning to like this Pinky character. I think I set some sort of record taking my clothes off, but it was obvious I had already lost and was a rotten egg. I walked over to the pool and, following Pinky's lead, got into the water and dropped to neck deep. Pinky said that I should sit in the seat behind me. I had not noticed that she was sitting in what seemed to be a sculpted seat. I turned and found behind me another, and it seemed to fit me because, as I sat, my head was out of the water. It was very comfortable, as the water was obviously artificially heated someplace. It could not be this warm coming out of the ground, only yards from where we were. I relaxed and let my mind go blank. Well, I'll finish this. This is about 58 minutes, and I'll see if it takes less than 6 hours to upload the next when I get the upload started in a few minutes. Tomorrow we're going to talk about Pinky showing Mac the entrance. Pinky showing Mac Pop's secret entrance to his mountain domicile. Been pretty interesting. We learned a lot today, didn't we? You wonder, is this real? Is there really something like this in Arkansas? You never know.